Oh, well, I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. There we go. So, when you feel trouble in the air, it's a good time for good trouble. John Lewis style. And when you feel gladness in the air, that's a good time to thank the chickadees. My name is Liam Battjes-Greenwood. I'll be the worship associate this service, and I am so pleased to welcome our special guest, Trish O'Kane, who has not been feeling good last week and has some cough drops and wanted to know where the water is, and her voice is working out. She said, I'm going to channel the power of the chickadees. I got this. She is a former war international journalist, correspondent. She is a social activist. She's an ornithologist from UVM. She is a good friend to one of my best friends, Susan Ogilvie, who you'll hear from. We teach together at Ripton. All three of us enjoy and savor the natural world. We enjoy teaching, and we are working in our own unique ways to try to make the world a more just and equitable place. Now, if any of those values sound good to you, then we are all in the right place. I want to begin the service by acknowledging that we are gathering on a place that was is Nadakana, the land of the Western Abenaki. And it was seized from them, and our European ancestors have claimed it. Some of the Abenaki and the Iroquois people refer to this region of the world as the Maple Nation. The Maple Nation, and it's good to remember that on this, just right after the full moon of Sogolikas. Sogolikas meaning the sugar moon, the Abenaki sugar moon. And it was a beautiful, beautiful full moon this week. So think about the maple trees. Think about them as the rulers of this land. Think about how they grace us with so much sweetness, and how they give shelter and shade to so many forms of life. And they invite us to reciprocate. CVUUS is a progressive community that is striving to reciprocate, to be a shelter to all different points of view and to anyone wherever they are on their journey, and also to bring some grace into the world and share the sweetness of justice and equity. Trish O'Kane models those values in her book, Birding to Change the World. And as we go through this service, you'll hear the voices of birds and the voices of humans beautifully woven together, as you did at the prelude, which was the Burlington Choral Society, which Trish sings in, and they had a whole concert with some also unique pieces that were all centered on birding to change the world. And so you caught just a little excerpt of that. So if the strings sounded like birds singing, oh, it was intentional. Oh, milestones and passages. I don't know if you were outside yesterday or today, but the birds were singing their milestones and passages. The Canada geese were honking about their arrival. The red-winged blackbirds were trilling about water quality. And the robins, I hear the robins often singing the Mexican hat dance. Now, if you have some milestones and passages in your life, then you can fill out a yellow card, put it in the offering plate, and then we'll sing your milestone and passage to everyone. If you have a personal concern and an anxiety or something that you don't want sung out loud, then fill out a pink card and our care team will follow up. If CVUUS is new to you and you think this is kind of a quirky service, well, stay tuned. The next one will be too, but it will be completely different. But you can fill out a visitor card that just helps us to keep in touch. Oh, it's a good idea right now to put your phones into don't interfere with my spiritual life mode. And then Trish is going to start us off with a call to worship, with a reading from her book, from the chapter called C'est la vie.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah. So it's such an honor to be here. And as Liam said, I'm struggling a little with my voice because probably like many of you, I've been shouting since November 5th. My husband was so happy this week I had laryngitis. He finally got a little respite. Not for long, though. Yes, this reading is from chapter 2 in the book, C'est la vie, as in the levees of New Orleans. What bird wilt thou employ to bring me word of thee? Henry David Thoreau, May 23rd, 1843. From the moment I looked into my new students' faces at Loyola University in New Orleans after Katrina, I felt so much joy. For the first time since the hurricane, I felt like I belonged somewhere, that I had a purpose. There was sadness, weariness, and fear in those very young eyes. Parents had lost jobs. Families who had lost their homes were in Houston or Atlanta. Some of my students were working over 30 hours a week in restaurants to cover their tuition. But I also saw hope in their eyes, and I wanted to channel that hope. I'd returned to New Orleans full of we can do it spirit, imagining that it was going to be like Managua, where I lived in the 1980s. A roll-up-your-sleeves partying revolution. We can write our way out of this, I kept telling my students. If you're pissed off, scared, sad, write it down. Let's take a Category 5 lemon and turn it into a swimming pool full of lemonade. And if you want to get published, get into my office. The fact that I had lost my own home now seemed like a tremendous teaching advantage. If my students could see me every day, standing in front of them, smiling, crying, swearing, laughing, and just plowing ahead, it would help them. They needed an example of a strong adult who could lose it for a minute and then get right back to work. I needed them to need this example. I was determined to be this example. But I also needed help fast. Before Katrina, as a journalist and news junkie, for 20 years, I'd always started my day with the newspapers or NPR. But after Katrina, I couldn't do that. The news was too dire. There were stories about asbesto clouds floating in the air in my neighborhood from demolitions just minutes away. There were reports from scientists measuring carcinogenic benzene in our soil from oil spills during the flooding. And climatologists were already discussing the next monster hurricane on the Gulf Coast, fueled by global warming. If I started the day with all this, I'd just go back to bed. I desperately needed another news source. I thought about my father sitting at his bay window in California, where I grew up, watching his hummingbirds and talking to Tara, a name he had for a mockingbird. I talk to my father almost every day now. He had stomach cancer, but instead of discussing his next big date with the chemo chair or his 3 anti-nausea medications, my dad talked about his birds or his plants. Even though he was getting sicker, by filling his feeders, he was still able to care for something. He was determined to focus on whatever joy he could squeeze out of every day he had left. I'd rejected many life lessons my father had tried to teach me because I was so angry at how I'd been treated compared to my brothers just because I was female. But my father didn't need to tell me to go out and buy feeders or watch birds. I just heard in his voice how much joy those $10 feeders brought him, even as his life was ebbing away. Now I think about this as a teacher, about how much we teach just by being and doing, not by lecturing and preaching. Sometimes I feel my students' eyes on me, especially when it seems like the world is falling apart. They watch the way I move through this world, how I face reality, how I find daily joy. And I realize that during the final year of his life, my father was preparing the most important lesson plan of all for his children: how to live while you know you are dying. Maybe there was something to this bird watching business. I walked into a hardware store, bought a bag of seed and 2 bird feeders, and hung them on the back fence of the hurricane trashed yard of my temporary New Orleans home. The next morning, I began a ritual that became a lifestyle, sitting on the back stoop with a cup of coffee and starting the day with The Sparrow Show, live and in color. As I watched those feeders, instead of thinking about where I was going to live and work, about what was going to happen in Louisiana, to the Gulf Coast, to the planet with global warming, I started wondering why one sparrow was lording it over all the others and hogging the seed. I started thinking about the sparrow's resilience, their pluckiness, their focus on their most immediate needs. If my feeders were empty, they went somewhere else. If they lost a nest, they built another. The sparrows didn't have the time or energy to sit around grieving. They clung to that chain link fence in raggedy lines, waiting for the feeders, heckling one another like drunken Mardi Gras revelers on Bourbon Street. Their sparring over seeds made me laugh, and I've been laughing ever since.
Will you join me? As we light this chalice, we watch the flame rise, much like we watch birds alight at the feeder in our backyard. Our eyes take wing and rise to a sky of changing weather, strong winds, and the promise of light and life. Thank you, Trish. Thank you, Trish, for the reminder that we've all gathered here with different stories, some of them very painful, about loss, or connecting to relationships that are difficult, or trying to be inspiring to our students. We all come with different stories. Last week we talked about how to greet each other with peace and different religious traditions that we could consider using or modeling in how we greet each other. I would like to propose that today we greet each other as a murmuration. In a murmuration, a cloud of starlings, they pay attention to the bird above them, the bird below them, the bird to their right wing, the bird to their left wing, one in front, one in back, and the one odd one at a diagonal. And with that, they fly in formation. There's no steering committee, no elections, no bylaws, nothing. They just fly in amazing, beautiful ways, and they democratically get what they need. So this is my idea of a murmuration. You look around to the people behind you and ahead of you, to the side. You don't have to make physical contact. In fact, that would knock you out of the sky and interfere with your flying. I'm just asking for a gesture that communicates how you're feeling and connect and receive the gesture of how others are feeling. So if you see the person in front of you, just reach your hand out. It might be a greeting. It might be saying, "Hi, Trish, I'm so glad you're here." You can murmur. It's a murmuration. You have 1 minute to murmur. Go.
Because we don't want them to like feel like we're using them to be on display so that there's somebody cute and attractive and that has something intelligent to say and we're putting them on display. But I'd like to invite the young people forward, and please drag along with you your favorite adult that you would like to kind of see them put on display. Because Trish would like to teach us how to dance like the American woodcock. Okay?
Y'all hear me? Yeah. And if any of you want to stand up and dance with us, please. We'd like all of you to dance. But yeah, I think the kids are going to enjoy this. Come on, kids. Come on, we're just going to do a little dance. It's no big deal. Come on. All right. Dad can dance, or whoever wants to dance. Come on up here. The rest of you, you're going to have to stand up anyway, so get ready. All right. Come on. All right. It's so easy. This is a super fun dance, and you can teach it to other kids. So, how many of you ever seen a woodcock? Yes. Are they back? Does anyone know? Has anyone seen a woodcock return yet? They usually come around these dates, and they fly from the south. And often there's a lot of snow. And you know woodcocks? Do you know what woodcocks eat? Somebody said? Worms. Right, worms. So if there's a ton of snow, hard for the woodcocks to get to the worms. But they have this big, long beak. See, kids back there? It's like that long. It's very, very long. That's so they can drill into the ground and find the worms. So right now, if they come, the snow is melted, the woodcocks are going to get their worms. So, yes, sweetheart. Yes. Do you know what kind of owl that is? Why am I wearing it? Because I get nervous when I speak and it makes me feel better. I love bird puppets. They give me confidence. Right? Okay, so the woodcock. So watch for woodcocks now, people. They're around us and they're landing in our fields and on our country roads. And I will be going out at 4 in the morning with a thermos. Try to get a few students. Good luck with that, but maybe a couple will show to watch for the woodcock. So here's what the woodcock does. It has its own way of dancing. Scientists don't know if it's a defense mechanism or if it's to sense the worms under the ground, but it's super fun and super easy and anybody can do it. This is the woodcock booty bob. Hit the link, please. Can you turn up the volume? No volume? Well, anyway, this is like to disco or something. But see, you put your foot down. There you go. Rock back and forth. Foot. There you go. Come on. Rock back and forth, people. Do it. Get your woodcock on. Oh, we got some good woodcocks here. Look at this. These are good. These are good. Very good. Very good. Very good. Come on. This is a funky woodcock. Come on. There you go. Come on, kids. I know you want to do it. You boys hiding back there. Come on. Come on. There we go. See how she does with her little chest. Okay, now we got one more. This is really funny. Really funny. This is the mama teaching the babies. Hit the next link. You don't have the other one? Oh, well, at home, you can Google Woodcock Booty Bob and look for the one with the mama teaching the babies, because that one is really hilarious. And it's to the tune Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. And she's teaching them to stay alive by getting out of the road. So she's leading them out of the road really fast. And somebody videoed this. Yeah. So scientists don't know why they do it, but it's super fun and anybody can do it. Thank you.
Excellent dancing. And those of you who, just got a little shy about the dancing, now's your time to sing. So we're going to sing the children out, but we're not going to use human words. It's not that we're going to tap into singing like different birds. Now, there's all kinds, and we're UUs. We don't have to do things in unison. So select a bird that you know. It might just be a jay, and you go, ah, ah, ah. Or you might do a crow, okay? I happen to love that I learned that cardinals are like the first video game players. Like they know how to play the Atari because they're always going do 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 do. And And there's so many bird calls. I do have, if somebody just can't whistle, I have one for you. Okay, does somebody have, could you come up here just to show you? I can't do it with, I'm holding the microphone. You want to do it back there? It's a loon call. It's a loon call, and you don't have to say anything. You just have to pull. Okay, so who's doing the loon? You want to pull it? Okay. You just pull really hard. Pull really hard. Cool. That one's going to sleep. Okay. With that, everybody's got their bird in their mind? Your goal is to make your call and find your people. Okay? So if you hear somebody else doing your call, you're like, oh yeah, let's get to social hour. And as we're calling, our fledglings will go off to RE. Here we go. You can. Should we stand? Yeah, we should stand. We always stand. Okay. Here we go. Oh, we do have the cardinal right there. I'm going to do the Atari. Here we go. Let's hear it.
Honkalulu.
So that you can read and see, and I won't talk as much. These are several pathways to connection to fly through. First, Trish will be downstairs with her book. She will sign it for you. If you're not prepared to buy a book, then you can always go to Vermont Bookstore. It's an amazing read. You can also join a hiking group. On the 30th of March, we'll launch it off, and along the hike somewhere, we're going to read a little section from Trish's book and then check out for birds. Next slide. Congregational conversation today after the service is to talk about RE and what the next chapter of RE might look like. And even if you are older than me, you might still feel like a kid at heart. And so this is our RE program. Let's have a conversation. New to UU. Those conversations are beginning next Sunday and then the next Sunday after. If you're new to this community or you're a returning member, it's a chance to see what does UU mean to you? And the Contra Dance is going to be today at this afternoon, and weather is supposed to be moving in. It's a great way to spend a rainy afternoon. And game night is this Friday. That is just a great antidote of laughter and connectedness to a difficult week. Those are ways of connecting. Now, we have a chance to realize that connecting in community is not always easy for people, especially if they've been subject to violence or abuse. The Atria Collective is all about creating a safe place and a healing place so that people can once again feel safe within community and realize they're part of community. So give as generously as possible.
And from this we live. We live.
Just is dancing and flying higher than I even imagined. So good young person to keep track of. Ethan, we're very proud of you. I think Jennifer taught him everything he knows, too. For milestones and passages, I'm going to give you a moment to just pause and listen to the passages that have happened in your life, those you know and love. And then I'm going to begin a reading that talks about some passages in Trish's life of growing in awareness and involvement. First, let's think about our own lives, and then we'll start another reading. A reading from a Category 5 plan. For millennia, our species has seen birds as symbols of liberation. they were certainly liberating me. They'd liberated me from depression. They'd liberated me from a career that had gone stale after focusing on the ugliest stories. They'd liberated me from the mental cage of a toxic relationship. And they'd liberated me from the tyranny of a life indoors staring at a screen. Bird by bird, every chickadee, nuthatch, bird, catbird, wren, and owl forged a new neural pathway in my brain, a joyful pathway. And then one bright, birdie morning, I discovered that my feathered liberators were in trouble. It was the summer of 2009, 2 years after I'd moved to Madison, Wisconsin. I was sitting outside in Hetty's yard facing Warner Park, my favorite stop for a birding tour. Hetty had heard that the city wanted to build a sidewalk leading from near her house into the meadow, paving a natural trail. The park already had a paved road running through it, and there was a sidewalk on my side of the street, so why pave through a meadow? Hetty used to keep an eye on neighborhood politics. She told me, but she was 80 and afraid of falling, so it was now hard for her to go to meetings at night. But Hetty suspected that the sidewalk was just the beginning of something else. Why can't the city leave the meadows and woods alone? She asked. Hey, you're studying ecology. Could you go to a meeting and find out about this? I didn't want to fight a stupid sidewalk. I'd come to Madison to hide in the ivory tower of academics and focus on my doctorate. I had come to Warner Park to find 100 bird species and become a real birder and ornithologist. I had no time for activism. Besides, Madison, like Middlebury, was a progressive city that had everything figured out. I didn't need to get involved. I'll admit it. I also had a rotten attitude about local politics. In Nicaragua and Guatemala, local politics were fascinating. But in the U.S., the doings of city councils and school boards, they just seemed trivial. Years earlier, I'd been an interpreter during secret meetings between U.S. congressmen and Salvadoran guerrillas in swanky hotel rooms in Mexico City. I'd interpreted for former President Jimmy Carter when he came to Nicaragua to meet with then President Violeta Chamorro. I'd schmoozed and strategized at urgent NGO conclaves in Panama City, San Jose, and Geneva, yet I'd never once been to a neighborhood council meeting. But this was Hetty asking me to do it. It would be like D. Carroll asking you to do something. Hetty was Our Lady of the Applesauce, the homemade currant jelly, and the freshly baked green bean pie. I couldn't say no to her. And that's how I ended up at my very first neighborhood association meeting in the country of my birth. This was the night I became a citizen of a place, not just of a world. Because of my involvement in this park and with these people, I started hanging around the apartment parking lots on Saturday and Sunday afternoons when a lot of people were outside. I asked them how long they'd lived there and what they thought about the park across the street. I asked what they thought about the neighborhood plan, and in case they hadn't heard that it was more than a sidewalk, I had excerpts to the plan to hand out. I expected to learn a lot about my neighborhood by passing out information, but I did not expect to learn more about the birds. One weekend, I was walking around with my clipboard on the park's perimeter, and I started talking with a married couple, a black man and a white woman, and they were standing outside their apartment across from where the new parking lot was going to go. And they told me that they loved the park, especially the deer that they saw grazing in that field. They'd never heard of the neighborhood plan. They didn't know that this field was going to be another parking lot. They were very unhappy to hear this. What about the hoot owls? The man asked. He specifically wanted to know I knew the owls he was talking about. I'd found one in the woods, very near his apartment in the winter. One night I was sitting in our living room around 6 o'clock when I heard an owl hooting. And the sky was darkening fast, but I grabbed my binoculars and ran into the park. A small blonde boy came tearing out of the apartment and stood next to me. His name was Aaron. Aaron and I peered deep into the woods together with our best owl eyes, trying to discern a large shape in the shadows. And then we saw it. A strange brown cylinder shape was about 2 feet tall, high in a pine about 50 feet away. The owl stared straight at us with those huge yellow-orange eyes, the largest of the owl world, its tufted horns blowing in the fall winds. The owl looked half the size of the little boy standing next to me. "Wow," Aaron said. "Is that an owl?" "It sure is." Aaron's face left the owl for a millisecond and turned looking at me. "That's the first time I've ever seen an owl," he said solemnly. "The first time." For several minutes, we stood in silence, side by side, two strangers watching an owl. Then the boy heard another call. It was his mom, telling him to come inside. And now my friend Susan Ogilvy would like to read a section called "Roll That Teacher Down the Hill."
So tall. What an honor to be here with my two good friends and a privilege to share this with you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Oh, I need this in my classroom. I just want to acknowledge the amazing writer that Trish is, because as I read this, her vivid details just make me smile, because she's really captured the essence of kids and what it means to be a big kid. We call them teachers, and share that joy that kids have. All right. On day one of the newly formed Bird Buddies Club at Sherman Middle School, my 13 nervous college mentors and I entered Warner Park's meadow with just 5 children. It was September, Wisconsin's season of large bumblebees clinging to waving fronds of goldenrod and goldfinches pecking at cornflowers, bending the stalks with their bright yellow weight. The milkweed was ready to release its silken seeds. Monarch butterflies preparing to migrate were flitting slowly above it all, orange and black. We took the kids straight to Sled Hill so that they could survey the marsh below. As everyone dutifully pointed their binoculars towards the marsh, I saw 2 birds, each 5 feet tall with a 7-foot wingspan. Warner's iconic sandhill cranes heading straight for us, flapping like pterodactyls. A comeback kid on steroids. This bird had neared extinction in Wisconsin decades earlier, but thanks to conservation efforts, there were now more than 70,000 cranes in the state. Warner's pair landed gracefully just yards from the children with a slightly smaller crane beside them, their chick called a colt. We stood there, kids and college students, amazed as the Crane family, parents and teenager, the size of a 6th grader, pecked at the grass, searched for grubs, and totally ignored us. Little people with binoculars didn't faze these giant birds. In this busy park, they had become used to lunging dogs, giant mowers, baseball games, fireworks, and rock concerts. The kids elbowed each other and whispered to their new mentors that the Crane teenager was just slightly smaller than its parents. Then our group watched the heron show as 2 great blue herons did their strange, stilted walk on the marsh's edge. They looked like feathered spies in their gray-blue coats. The kids and their college mentors began imitating that walk. The kids kept exclaiming that the cranes, geese, and heron were almost as tall as they were. Our birding club began to grow every week, child by unruly child, doubling in just a month. It would double every year for the next 3 years. The first semester, the group was quite well behaved, almost all little nature nuts. A hunter boy who liked to chase butterflies and sing loudly off-key, a little girl named Meredith with owl-like eyes behind her thick glasses, so loaded down by the end of each park visit with leaves, sticks, branches, and other nature stuff that her college mentor had to help carry the mile back to school. Another boy obsessed with Cooper hawks, a boy whose goal was to find fairy glens in the park, and a girl who loved eagles, and Gabriel the geese lover who told his mentor that he was going to become an Air Force pilot. He also announced that he was going to be the first kid to earn the new set of binoculars that the university was promising every child. Since I'd taken an advanced ornithology course at the University of Wisconsin, I thought I'd just use a similar structure of readings, quizzes, and an activity every 20 minutes to keep these hormone-fueled middle schoolers out of trouble. I started each birding session on top of Sled Hill with a listening post exercise. The preteens had to close their eyes for 20 minutes, sit silently, and then scribble down every sound they'd heard. Yes, it was 20 minutes. That's not a typo. Afterward, we scanned the horizon for birds. Then I gave the children and my students a quiz on both the common and Latin names of the birds. If the kids spelled everything right, they earned points toward a new pair of binoculars. I realize now, as I study my old teaching journal, that I had no idea to teach outside. While I was making them sit still on Sled Hill, scribbling down the Latin name for downy woodpecker, a red-tailed hawk would suddenly streak right over us as if screaming, "Look at me, I'm here," and the whole lesson would be out the window. This ridiculous routine lasted a few weeks. Then one day, as I stood in front of the squirming group to begin the day's lesson plan, the kids started rolling sideways down the hill. My college students stared at me with big eyes, asking silently, "What should we do now?" I was speechless. So they followed the children's lead and they rolled down one by one, spinning balls of arms and legs. I found myself standing utterly alone on top of Sled Hill, the kids and my students all rolling around below, screaming and laughing. After a few minutes, I did the only thing that made sense. I put down my clipboard, my binoculars, my backpack, removed my eyeglasses, and rolled down Sled Hill. And that was the end of the listening posts, the Latin names, and those lesson plans. And I just wanted to tip my hat to Trish among her many, many, many other talents. She is a masterful teacher, and I had the extreme privilege of having her bring her college students to my classroom about a year and a half ago. Number one, I don't know how she got all those students up in Ripton at 8 a.m. in the morning, but she did it. And number two, just her, there's a real teaching to art, but Trish asked her college mentors the most thoughtful questions that challenged them, but at the same time extended the thinking of my 9 and 10-year-old students, and it was truly incredible to see. So bravo to Trish for her teaching abilities.
Well, if you all know anything about the teaching that Susan does in Ripton, she's a hard act to follow. My students and I were blown away. We work at Flynn Elementary School in Burlington with 4th and 5th graders. It's a wonderful school. It's my neighborhood school. I love it very much. But we do have quite a bit of issues with behavior, and it's getting worse and worse. I think it's the phones and COVID and all that, and the class sizes. And my college mentors could not believe the difference in behavior when we got to Ripton. The class size, the teacher. Susan never yelled. She didn't even raise her voice. Half the time she was speaking to them in sign language or something. We just couldn't believe it. My students talked about it for months, how different the culture was, the size of the school, and how all these problems we saw at Flynn just evaporated. Still thinking about that, especially with the changes going on, which are just heart-wrenching. I want to dedicate this short reflection to one of the most important mentors of my life. Her name was Dr. Nora Hamilton. She was the college professor who taught me about the devastating impact of U.S. foreign policy on Central America. She set me on my path. Nora was also a Unitarian in Los Angeles, where I went to college, and she died last year. I never imagined that I would be speaking before a Unitarian congregation or any congregation, although I am a huge fan of Unitarian Universalists. As you know from my memoir, I was raised in a very dark, conservative, misogynistic Catholicism, a theocracy, where my Sunday school teacher mother marched around our house lighting holy candles and declaring Rome is always right. In the book, I describe my Irish family's religious culture as throw the last pope, not Francis the Groovy, but Benedict the Inquisitor and the Ayatollah Khomeini into a blender. Not fun. My Northern Irish parents imported this culture with them when they emigrated to Orange County, California, where I was raised. By the time I escaped to college at USC in Los Angeles, I was in full rebellion. But as a child who grew up going to Mass every morning at 6:30 a.m. with my family during Lent, and although I shrank in horror at some of the Good Friday Stations of the Cross gore, I loved the incense, the candles, and all that mystical mumbo-jumbo. In college, when I suddenly cut myself off from the only spirituality I knew, it was both liberating and terribly disorienting. I felt like a tree suddenly yanked out of the ground, its roots drying in the wind, hanging useless. And so as an undergraduate at USC, I began a spiritual quest. I got on a city bus and traveled 11 minutes down Wilshire Boulevard to the First Unitarian Church of Los Angeles. I cannot remember who pointed the way or why I ended up there at a Sunday service over 40 years ago. I had absolutely no clue what Unitarian meant, and I was leery that it could be one of those weird cults my parents had warned me about, like the Hare Krishnas we saw every weekend at Laguna Beach. But I can remember my astonishment as I sat in a pew right before the service, poring over the script, hungrily reading it for signals. It was unlike any Catholic liturgy I'd ever seen. I was stunned that we would be singing hymns in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Korean. And I loved the simplicity of the flame, such a powerful symbol. To some of you raised in this church, these may seem like small things. I did not become a Unitarian, but that service blew the roof off my head because I realized that there were so many possibilities out there, so many ways to be spiritual, to care, to commune, and most importantly to me at that particular moment, ways that did not mean a dungeon-like second-class citizenship for women. Watch for some of those people in the White House. They're coming for us again, ladies. After college, I moved to Nicaragua to work for the Sandinista Revolution, again thanks to my mentor, Nora, who got me a research job at a fabulous Jesuit think tank in steamy Managua. After 10 years in Central America as a human rights investigative journalist, I moved to Montgomery, Alabama, epicenter of the civil rights movement, to work at the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate crimes researcher. There in Montgomery, when President George Bush was threatening to invade Iraq, I rediscovered Unitarianism really fast. I wanted to organize a local peace group to welcome President Bush and Vice President Cheney whenever they came to Montgomery, which was often. So I thumbed through the phone book, called that church, and became fast comrades with UU's Reverend Tracy Sprouse, who is a one-woman revolution. We launched the Montgomery Peace Project and protested for 6 months before the war began and for a year afterwards, every Wednesday on the steps of the state capitol, just a block from Dr. King's little brick church, Dexter Avenue Baptist. So I learned really young that if you want to get in what John Lewis called some good trouble, call the Unitarians. 1 month ago, I remembered this when a group of us in Burlington decided we were going to organize a protest in front of Tesla. So great that they opened that showroom last year, right? So convenient. So I Googled, yeah, I love it. I Googled the UU minister, and thanks to Reverend Karen Johnson, a few days later, 165 of us were lined up on Route 7 outside Tesla, all boogieing in front of television crews. So thank you, Reverend Sprouse. Thank you, Reverend Johnston. Thank you, Liam. And thank you to every single one of you for your inspirational, spiritually powered citizenship. All right, I have to talk about birds. You know that. So I'm going to talk about birds because this talk's called We Are The Chickadees. I'll admit that for the past month, I've been stumped and stressed out about giving this talk to you all, especially at this particular moment in our history. And I've been thinking, how can birding change the world right now? I've been speaking about the book across the country for a year, and I've spoken in Canada. The book is about to be published in South Korea. It's been translated into Korean, and it's being translated into Mandarin. It will be published in China. But I thought I can't just give my usual book club spiel today. La, la, la. Get out there, people. Watch some birds, and everything will be fine. Yet, when I don't know what to do, that's exactly what I do. I go consult my feathered comrades. And in the 18 years I've been doing this daily since Katrina, they have never, ever let me down. And so 12 days ago, on the morning of Monday, March 3rd, it was very bright and sunny and 13 degrees. I filled a bag with birdseed and I drove to Woodside, which is a natural area belonging to St. Michael's College in Winooski. During COVID, some dear bird-loving soul, some wannabe St. Francis, decided to train the birds in that refuge to come to their hands to feed. They must have spent hours out there daily in the cold during COVID, outstretched palms filled with seed, turning themselves into a bird feeder. I've never seen this person. I don't know who they are, but I know that if you go to Woodside, there is a crowd of chickadees, titmice, nuthatches, mourning doves, goldfinches, downy woodpeckers, maybe even a red-bellied woodpecker waiting for you. Last fall, after the election, I took my birding students there to raise all our spirits. My college students stood still as statues for an hour, beaming as tiny birds landed on their palms and even large woodpeckers landed on their heads. Since that class, my students have taken their roommates, partners, and visiting parents there. These must be the best fed birds in New England. But that Monday, 2 weeks ago, tomorrow, it was so cold and quiet. I was the only human there. It took about 5 minutes for the first bird to land. It was a chickadee, one plumper, slightly larger, and more full of himself than his buddies, who were watching very closely from nearby. He cocked his head and stared at me for a second or two, and then he grabbed that first tempting sunflower seed. Then he zipped right up above me into a small tree to pound the seed against the trunk until he cracked it open. He did this over and over again for the next 40 minutes. Meanwhile, other chickadees began zooming and hovering all around me like gigantic mosquitoes. They did not land at first. Several observed from the bushes just a few feet from my face as first chickadee kept going back and forth. Another chickadee kept making a beeline for my hand, dipping down, nearly skimming my palm, but then she suddenly would change her mind, nope, and she'd go right back into the tree. Back and forth she went, over and over again, like a pendulum. All the birds were making little squeaky noises, chortling, possibly conferring on whether I was safe or not. The second chickadee to actually land spent several seconds dumping the seed out of my palm onto the snow just below before grabbing a seed for himself. Within seconds, there were about 6 chickadees around my boots eating those dumped seeds on the snow. And I wondered, was the seed-dumping chickadee trying to help feed his buddies who were too scared to land on my palm? Within about 20 minutes, there were 3 chickadees in my right palm fighting over seed, giving each other scary looks, and one opening his beak just a fraction of an inch, which was enough to send the other 2 skedaddling back into the bushes. Meanwhile, a 4th was perched here on my sleeve, waiting his turn. Just as the birds do at my backyard feeder, they line up in our old apple tree. There were chickadees who only wanted peanuts, chickadees who only plucked sunflower seeds, and chickadees who preferred the shellless safflower seeds. One single chickadee chose a single-shelled pumpkin seed. He was a culinary avian adventurer. I chatted with some of them. They did not seem to mind, but mostly I delighted in the tiny, trusting clutch of those skinny talons hanging on to my smart wool mitten. At 13 degrees and with a north wind, it was so bitterly cold that my feet were turning into blocks of ice. I could only stand like St. Francis of the frozen tundra for about 40 minutes. Not long enough for the other bird species to find their courage and land on my hand. But the bushes were full of them, titmice and nuthatches and downy woodpeckers, all watching the entire time from the branches above me, as if I were standing on a stage and they were up in the balconies. They did not dare approach. They just watched and watched as the chickadee circus grew louder and rowdier, with a chickadee buzzing by my right ear like a very large bee, other chickadees flapping in my face, so close I thought they were going to land on my nose or my glasses. It's happened. The sensation on my cheek of the frigid air moving as they rushed in, grabbed a seed, stared at me, and then they rushed back to their safe perch. I was disappointed that morning. I was really hoping the other birds would gather their courage and come to my hands. And I knew that chickadees can communicate with over 50 different bird species, and that even chipmunks and squirrels understand chickadee alarm calls, which can travel up to 100 miles per hour. So if the chickadees were telling everybody in Woodside that I was okay and trustworthy and that they were having a chickadee brunch party, why didn't all the other birds come? And then I thought back to every time I have hand-fed birds over the past decade. The first bird to fly in is always a chickadee. They are intrepid. Their curiosity always overcomes their fear of a giant predator. They are the first avian to inquire, what in the hell is going on here? Why is that crazy human standing there with seeds in her hands? Is she a predator? Are those seeds any good? This frigid morning was just 24 hours after protesting, squeaking, screeching, furious Vermonters chased Creep Veep Vance out of our little state after his disgraceful bullying of President Vladimir Zelensky. I was still exhausted that morning from screaming and jumping up and down with 1,000 other people in Waitsfield over the weekend. But as I stood there in the center of the chickadee circus, I realized we are the chickadees. Vermonters are the chickadees. It takes that first sassy, bold one to land and grab a seed while all the other birds are watching so closely. But within minutes, the other chickadees gather their courage and they begin streaming back and forth. But they have to watch first. Then they realize this big human is safe, and those big human mitts are safe and full of treats, and they're zooming in and out, and other bird species are watching them. And if it's not 13 degrees and you can stay an hour or more, you may end up with a woodpecker on your head, just like my students. I realized that this precious little spot in Woodside was the same as Waitsfield 48 hours earlier, with people driving by in a line of 1,000 of us dancing on both sides of the main road to disco blaring from giant speakers set up by a DJ who magically appeared in a truck and set everything up out of nowhere. And the hundreds of cars driving by, many of them filled with young people headed to the ski slopes, looking so surprised and then suddenly cheering and honking when they realized why we were there. I saw the looks on their young faces. Looks like, this is so much fun. They're having fun. And maybe there's a treat out there for me, a seed of friendship, comradeship, solidarity, hope, and joy. The very next morning, Sunday, journalist buddies in London emailed me with links to news stories all over Europe about our protests. One said in capital letters, "Congratulations, wow, Vermont," with a link to a piece on Sky TV. Another buddy sent me a link to a story in the UK Telegraph, the most conservative paper in England, describing us and how the vice president who berated and bullied President Zelensky was too scared and had his Secret Service reroute him so he didn't have to see us, that he was running from the protesters in Vermont. That's how that story was played in England. Very funny. So to end, thinking about chickadees and what we can learn from their defense strategies, a distracted chickadee is a dead chickadee. Their entire defense system depends on watching each other and listening to each other's contact and alarm calls. We too often forget that we also are animals and that there are predators out there coming for us. We are just like the chickadees. Our attention, our vision is our first line of defense. The tech broligarchy is trying to breach those defenses. They have us turning down towards screens instead of turning towards each other. Be a chickadee. Turn towards each other. And in the words of our congressional rep, Rebecca Strum, who is a human chickadee on steroids if I've ever seen one, we must be focused and fierce. Focused and fierce. Thank you.
That was focused and fierce. Would you stand and sing with me Lone Wild Bird and True to the UU Spirit? I rewrote the words. So the words are on the screen. The tune is in your hymnal, but you'll catch on to the tune.